What an encouraging and motivating video to start off part 2 of The Grass is Greener. My name is Jeremy, and I'm our service programming director here at North Point. And all that means is I get to work with an incredible team of people, our musicians, our production team, guest services, music, everything that happens, media, and we just get to create the adult experience that happens week to week. And I love what I get to do, and I love that each of you are in here today, and I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. My family had a pretty good one, and here's my little family right here. My wife, Ashley, and our 2 dogs. Breck is our happy-go-lucky golden, and Bear is our sad old man dog that we have as well. But that's my family. We had a great Thanksgiving. And for me, I love the holidays. I love Thanksgiving week. I love the football, the food, the family, everything that goes into it. And one of my favorite experiences growing up, while I was growing up, we'd get the stacks of catalogs that you get, the catalogs that have all the Black Friday deals in it. And I would just comb through those over and over again. And I don't know why, I didn't have any money to spend on anything, but I just liked looking at all of these deals. And what's interesting about Black Friday is it's not just a Friday now. It now starts Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening, all the stores begin to open. And I experienced this actually firsthand last year. My wife and I were on the way home from some friend's house for Thanksgiving in Georgetown. We were driving south on I-35, and I just had this stupid thought. And I said, hey, babe, why don't we just swing by the outlet mall? And little do I know, you don't just swing by the outlet mall on Thanksgiving night. That is a terrible idea. Because the things that I had to bring out of myself, the human nature that came out of me just trying to find a parking spot was crazy. Not to mention the lines, you're shoulder to shoulder with people in the Nike store. There's another pair of shoes, and you see out of the corner of your eye, another person wants it, and you're who's going to get it first, and you're squaring off with people. And then I really thought that after 2 years of marriage that we had this whole thing figured out. We were just killing it. And little did I know that Black Friday just brought all of that crumbling down. Because all of a sudden, I was more of a cynic, okay, what's the catch-22? Are we really getting a deal? Are we not? And then Ashley was more hey, buy 25, get one free. That's a steal. That's fantastic. And so it really brought a lot of marriage problems out of us. But, I love Black Friday. And one thing that's interesting, that I actually looked up a couple of statistics about it. And so Black Friday, if you didn't know this, more people visit Walmart on Black Friday than people visit Disneyland and Disney World combined in an entire year, which is crazy to think about. So you don't need to go to Florida. You don't need to go to California. You can just go to Walmart for your vacation. That's all you need to do. Not only this, but 12% of Black Friday shoppers are under the influence. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. So the next time you're squaring off with somebody else who wants those pair of shoes, just be aware they might be more willing to fight you for them than you are, right? And then lastly, this one was interesting, but more people have died as a result of Black Friday than shark attacks, on average, over the past 2 decades, which is wild to think about. So if you want the Black Friday experience, all you have to do is go jump into a shark tank at Disney World under the influence, and there you go. That's what Black Friday feels like. But for me, I love Black Friday. I love looking through all the deals. But essentially what ends up happening is I tell myself at first, no, I don't want anything. I don't need anything. And then I start to look at these things, and I see a deal for this electronic gadget because I'm a nerd and I like those kind of things. And I begin to do all these mental math scenarios in my head. And I begin to say, well, if Ashley doesn't need half her clothes, I can sell half of those, and we can move into a tiny house, and then we can buy this TV that won't fit in the tiny house, and that'll make a lot of sense. And I start to run all of these scenarios in my head, and I essentially fall into this idea. This whole series is based upon that the grass is always greener on the other side. Meaning if I get this, or I get that, or once I get here in life, or once I arrive at this thing, or I get to this level of success, then I will finally have made it. The grass will finally be greener. Life will finally be happy. And it makes sense that we do this, right? We live in a culture that's just so saturated with all of these marketing tactics, these brilliant advertisers who just give us this idea that if we just buy this thing, if we just do this, then life will finally be greener. The grass will finally be greener. And it's not a knock on culture or the world. It's just the reality that we live in. And I don't know about you, but I often find myself giving sort of a rating for how I'm doing in specific areas of life. Maybe you can relate to this, maybe not. But we have all these different categories of our life. And this surely isn't all of them, but we have all these different categories. And as we go through and we think about our day, we tend to give ourselves kind of a rating for how we're doing. We might say that when it comes to looks, maybe we're a 6. We're somewhere in between like Shrek and Ryan Gosling, like somewhere on that spectrum, right? So we're not doing too bad. A house, there's always more house to get. There's always, more we can do to the house. We're 5. Bank account, nobody, would be upset if there was another 0 on the end of the number. So we'll say bank account, we're a 7. Family, an 8. Maybe before Thanksgiving, it was an 8 or a 9, and now you're down to a 6 or 7. Something happened, the holidays. Talent, 5. Fun, wouldn't mind getting out a little bit more. That's a 5. A relationship, 7. Career, we live in Austin, one of the best economies in the nation, but there's always more success. There's always more ladder to climb. And then faith, we haven't killed anybody, but we could probably go to church a little bit more, so we'll just land like right in the middle there on that spectrum. And we tend to do this. We tend to rate ourselves on how we're doing. Maybe you average a little bit higher, maybe you average a little bit lower, maybe there's some other categories in your life. But here's what happens, is we look to our right and our left, and we see social media, and we hear from family and friends, and we talk to people on the phone, and we come to this assumption that somehow everybody around us looks like that. Somehow everybody around us is hitting 10 out of 10 across the board. It doesn't matter. They have the same amount of 24 hours that we have, but somehow they're just knocking it out of the park. And so we hold ourselves to this standard. And so what do we do in response to this? But we begin to chase and chase and chase this 10 out of 10 greener grass life. And we say yes, and we cram everything we possibly can into our life, and we say yes, yes, and we chase, and we hurry. And all of a sudden, we find that our lives are characterized by that very word. Hurry. Hurry. We say, I can't do that, I'm in a hurry. I don't have time for that, I'm in a hurry. And the green grass is always kind of enticing us to chase and say yes to more and more in our life, and our lives are crammed with all these things that are going on. And it's no coincidence that the phrase says the grass is always greener on the other side. Meaning no matter how fast we hurry or where we get to, or if we get to the green grass that we thought was going to finally make us happy, there's still an always, a never-ending always of greener grass on the other side. And you might be sitting here and you might be thinking, well, Jeremy, I just want to maximize my life. I just want to maximize my time, my capacity. And if that's you, I totally get that. We want to enjoy life, and I'd put myself in the same exact category. But here's where we have to be really careful. Because when we do that, potentially, when our life becomes characterized by hurry, we are robbed of the very things that we chase. When our life becomes characterized by hurry, we are robbed of the very things that we chase. Meaning the happy, peaceful, and content life that we are go, 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 that we're trying to get to. We cram everything we possibly can into our life. And then all of a sudden, we look and we go, I don't have the happy, peaceful, and content life that I thought I would have if I would chase these things. Not only that, but a life characterized by hurry can rob us of our health. We literally don't have time to sleep. There's been so many studies to say what happens to you as a pace of life increases, physically, emotionally, mentally, what can happen as a result of this. Not only that, but a life characterized by hurry robs us of joy. We literally don't have time to experience the things in our life that make us happy. Not only this, but it robs us of peace. Robs us of peace in life. There seems to be this synonymous increase in pace of life, and also to go with that, what happens is anxiety tends to increase as well. And our day-to-day peace is very limited. And because of that, hurry can rob us of success. There's this phrase that we throw out in culture. We say, oh, they burnt out. They burnt out. They went too fast for too long, chasing success, and ultimately that chase undermined the very thing they were trying to get to. This is why we see so many business leaders and executives and CEOs who lead some of the most innovative companies, and they just go, 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 and they create some of the most innovative products. And then we hear about them in the news that the stress and the anxiety ultimately got the best of them. Not only this, but hurry can rob us of intimacy. Busyness tends to lead to a self-absorption that just says to the most important people in our life, I just don't have time for you. And all of a sudden, we are robbed of the intimacy in our relationships with our family and friends, our spouse, our kids, and most importantly, our relationship with God, with our Heavenly Father. When our life becomes characterized by hurry, we are robbed of the very things we chase. And we wake up every single day, and we look at our calendar, we think about all the things we got to do, we get in the car, and we go to work, and we get the kids loaded up, and go to school, and whatever it is, and then we get to the end, and we have to make dinner, and then we got to think about the next day, and we check our calendar for the next day, and we look at everything that's going on, and then we lay our head on our pillow, and then all of a sudden we just have this feeling just before we go to bed at night, and we just say to ourselves, I just wish I could get some rest. I wish I could get some rest. I wish I could pause. I wish I could slow down for a moment. Isn't that what we do? But then the greener grass mentality kicks in again. And we say to ourselves, well, once I get here, once I make this much money, once I arrive at this place, then I can rest. Then I can be at peace. Then I can finally slow down. And we go to bed, and we wake up, and we do it all over again, and we chase, and we chase, and we chase. What if there was something better than that? Better than this hurry, this chase that we have in life to get to the greener grass. See, I think when it comes to living a life characterized by hurry, that God actually has something better for us. And the reason I say that is because when you open up the pages of the Bible, what you discover is that this isn't a people issue, it's not a life issue, but this is actually a faith issue. And the reason I say that is because when you open the pages of the Bible, what you discover is that it comes up over and over and over again. And it looks like it's very important to God in our life. And so what I want to do today is I want to look at 3 key specific moments where this pops up. And I want to unpack why this is so important to him. And the first one is in the very beginning, in the book of Genesis. If you've ever just opened up the Bible and read it from the beginning, you start at the book of Genesis. And the first chapter is all about the creation of the world, and then you get to the second chapter, and this topic of rest comes up. And here's what Moses writes when he's writing this down. He says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. The world was created. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work." He rested from all his work. This word rest right here, it literally means to cease, to finish, to stop working. Now, what's interesting here is when you think about the attributes of God, God does not need to rest. He is God. He's unlimited to our same level of human physicality that we deal with day to day, but God rested, and we go, okay, well, why did he do this? It goes on, it says, "Then God blessed the 7th day, and he made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. He blessed the 7th day and made it holy." That word holy right there literally means set apart. So he took this 7th day and he set it apart, and he made it different from all of these other days. He made it a moment, a day of rest. And I don't know about for you in your life, if you've ever had those moments, those set apart moments, maybe it's on a vacation or on a trip at some point, when your feet are just kind of in the sand at a beach and you're just all of a sudden able to go, and you just breathe deeply for a moment and all the worries of the world just kind of wash away. That's what these set apart moments look like, and that's what God desires for us. And we see early on that when it comes to rest, that God sets the example. He sets the example. He says, here's what it looks like. It's this holy period. It's this set apart period. And then you fast forward through the chronological events that happen in the Old Testament, and you find yourself with the nation of Israel. They are considered to be God's people. And the nation of Israel had just come out of Egypt. And they came out of Egypt led by Moses, and they're wandering through the wilderness, wandering around for decades and decades. And up until this point, they actually hadn't received a written set of laws or commands from God. And for the first time, they received this written set of laws. It's very well known, whether you've been to church for a while or you haven't been to church. Maybe you've seen the original movie in the 50s or 60s, but they're called the 10 Commandments. And God goes through the first 3, and he says, hey, have no other gods but me. And then he says, hey, don't have any idols. And then he says, don't take my name in vain. And he gets to the 4th one, and it kind of feels like it took a little bit of a right turn. And here's what it says. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. This word Sabbath, it's a derivative of the original Hebrew that it's written in. It literally means rest. Remember this rest day by keeping it holy, by keeping it set apart. Remember the example that I set for you. Now you implement that in your life. And here's what that looks like. He says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. This one day a week, you're supposed to set apart and rest and not do any work and use this day to recharge. And God says, this isn't just for you, but this is for me as well. He says it's a Sabbath to the Lord your God. To the Lord your God. In other words, what he's saying is, hey, before it was an example and a suggestion, but he takes it a step further. And he says, now this is a law. It's an act of obedience. It's an act of faith. And God actually makes it a command. He makes taking a day off, resting, a command. And what's interesting is when you look at the rest of these commandments that are within the 10, it sticks out because he goes on to say, hey, don't lie, don't cheat, don't murder, don't commit adultery, all of these things, honor your mother and father. And I think the Israelites would go, we'll go back, God, are you saying take a day off is on the same list? Are you kidding? Really, you want us to take a day off? And not only that, but when you think about the context of where the Israelites are at right now, they're going, well, what about tomorrow? What if something happens? Because they've been wandering around in the wilderness for decades and decades, literally kids, generations who have grown up just being in the wilderness, not knowing if they're going to have food the next day, not knowing if they're going to have shelter, not knowing what's going to happen the next day. And they hear this from God, and they're going, seriously? Take 1 out of 7 days off? What if we can't provide for tomorrow? And as I was thinking about this, I couldn't help but think about a very modern day example of the Sabbath. And you probably know it really well, and it is the business that takes every Sunday off, and it is Chick-fil-A, right? And I'm just curious, by a show of hands, who in here has tried to go, driven up to a Chick-fil-A on a Sunday? Yeah, I've done that 6 times, but, I was surprised that some other people had too. But Chick-fil-A takes every single Sunday off, and they've done this since the beginning of their business. And when you look at them as a company, you would assume that this actually hurts them. You would assume that this is like a seventh of their profit, maybe more because it's a weekend, a seventh of their profit that's just gone. But what's wild is when you look at them statistically compared to other fast food restaurant chains, that they actually rank number 1 in profit per store against all other restaurant chains. And it goes a little bit deeper than that. When you compare them to Whataburger, and Whataburger is open 24/7 and on Sundays, they are open 30% less of the time, and they make twice as much money. That's crazy to think about. And they've gotten ridiculed for taking Sundays off over the years, but they've just stuck to it. And they've just said that the somewhat intangible benefits of giving their employees a day off to rest with their families, time to focus on the business, margin for the business, that those benefits outweigh the cost of taking a day off. And the reason I share that with you is because when God is talking to the Israelites and he's giving them these 10 commandments, he's saying, hey, this command that I have given you, it's so that those 6 days that you work and you labor, they are going to be so much better and enjoyable and fruitful because of this one day that you take to pause and stop and recharge. This is what he's saying to the Israelites right here. And then you fast forward through the Bible just a little bit more. You get out of the Old Testament, out of the Old Covenant where it's all about rules and laws, and into the New Covenant that Jesus introduces. And you find that this New Covenant is all about loving God, loving people. It's all about belief, right? And then this topic of rest and hurry tends to come up again. And we see again that it's so important to God. And what happens is Jesus gets in an argument with the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are the religious leaders of the time during this era 2,000 years ago. And he gets into an argument with them. And this argument is documented. It's written by a guy named Mark who wrote one of the Gospels. He was one of Jesus' followers. And here's what he describes as he accounts this. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields. And as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. They began to pick these heads of grain with the intention of eating them. The Pharisees said to him, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? In other words, the Pharisees, these self-righteous, meticulous rule followers, they look at the disciples doing this, and they're picking these heads of grain with the intention of eating them, and it looks like they are working. And they say, why are they breaking the law on the Sabbath? And they're calling out the disciples because they want to catch Jesus and his disciples. They do not like them. And Jesus responds, and he knows something. He is so brilliant. He knows that the Pharisees are more concerned about the law than the purpose of the law in the first place. And he responds with this simple but so profound statement that he says. Look at what he says. Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." In other words, there wasn't this Sabbath idea, and then man comes along and just has to follow the law for the sake of following the law. He said, no. God knew that our tendency would be to look over the fence at everybody else's greener grass around us and want to chase all of those greener grass scenarios and cram everything we possibly can into our life and go, 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 go. And so God created this thing not because he wanted something from us, but because he wanted to provide something for us. He wanted something for man. It was a gift to man, taking time to recharge and rest because God wanted us to realize that perhaps we have freedom when this happens. When we pause, when we rest, it's not something that restricts us, that we have freedom as a result. When we pull back and we stop chasing, that we have freedom, that we experience freedom. So often we think of these laws and commands as something to restrict, but God is saying no. Jesus says no. This is to provide freedom in your life for you to experience the life that I have for you. And God wants us to realize that the grass isn't greener on the other side. Perhaps it is green right where we are. We're just going too fast to notice. That perhaps our chase, looking at everybody else's greener grass, causes us to go, go, go all the time. Perhaps life isn't perfect and life is broken and we've all got messiness, but perhaps there's some green grass that we're already standing on. We just can't see it because we're going far too fast to notice. What really brings this to life for me is when I think about what I studied in college. I went to UT, and I got a degree in radio, television, and film. And so I learned all about cameras, and I'm a total geek when it comes to cameras. And if you like that stuff, then call me, and we'll talk for hours just about cameras. That's what I like to do. But I learned all about this stuff, and one of the concepts we learned about was this thing called motion blur, when your pictures look something like this. And motion blur can be a cool thing. You can do it on purpose. You can do it strategically. But oftentimes, motion blur ends up accidentally, and it ends up ruining pictures that we take. And I think that when I think about what hurry does to our life and the pace of our life, this is what tends to happen as well. We look back on memories, experiences, moments that just go by, and they look something like this. And we think back on our life, and it all tends to look like a blur. And we get to a point and we just say to ourselves, I can't believe it's already 2019. I can't believe the kids have gotten this big. I can't believe I just celebrated that birthday. And it feels like life is a blur. Wouldn't it be so disappointing to open up our phone and look in our phone and see that all of our pictures had motion blur on them? Wouldn't that be so frustrating? Why is it then that we allow our lives, when we look back, to feel the exact same way? The way you get rid of motion blur, one of the ways, there's a couple different ones, but one of the ways is simply by being still. When you take the picture, by pausing, holding still, bringing your elbows in, steadying the camera as you take the picture. And when you do that, you get a clear image. And the pictures I just showed you are actually treasured, set apart moments that I've experienced in my life. The first was the most important day of my life when I married Ashley on our wedding day. And it's such a treasured moment, and I remember everything leading up to it. I was going, well, what about and what if, and I don't know if I'm going to be the good provider that I want to be, and there were all these greener grass scenarios going on in my mind. And then I remember finally when we were at that moment and standing across from each other, everything just kind of went away. And I was just able to pause, and it was hands down the happiest moment of my life. And she still has no idea what she got into, which is great. And then I remember a very simple day when I was with my family. I was with my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and we were taking this picture together. And I don't even remember what we were laughing about. But I do remember that during this time, life was crazy. It was busy. There was a lot going on. And I didn't want to be there, and I didn't want to take the picture, but then we just had this laugh together, and we shared this moment, and it was another one of those, everything just kind of fell into place. It was a moment to remember. Then I remember just recently, Ashley and I took a trip out to Big Bend National Park. And it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. I didn't know there were mountains in Texas. And then I drive up to these guys, and I'm like, wow, there are mountains in Texas. And it was amazing. And I remember waking up this morning. It was the first morning we woke up when we were there. And I didn't wake up from an alarm. I woke up because the sun came over the mountains, and it was literally the sunlight that woke me up for once in my life. And I remember wanting to get up and begin cooking breakfast and going, and we're going to go on a hike and all these things. And I looked outside my tent, and I saw this, and I was just so in awe. Ashley was just sleeping next to me, and it was just so quiet and still, and there were birds chirping. It was just a beautiful day. And I just paused, and it felt like all the worries just kind of went away. And I snapped this picture because I wanted to remember it. And I put it on my desktop, on my laptop, so I would be able to see it every single day and be reminded of these moments in life that we miss if we don't slow down. And to be honest, there's a lot of memories and moments that I don't have captured and that I don't remember because life was going too fast and I was far too busy to notice. And I'm sure I look back on things that have happened and it's all just a blur. And multiple people within my life in the past couple months have said, hey, Jeremy, you don't have any margin. You got to slow down, dude. And so this is something that I definitely need to work on, and I'm definitely wrestling with. But for the rest of our time, I just want to flip it around to you. And I want to ask you that in your life, when you think about the pace of life that you're going, when you think about the hurry that you experience day by day by day, what does it look like for you to set apart rest? To set apart rest, to set apart time, to pause, to be still, to stop looking at all the other greener grasses and potentially give yourself enough time to notice that perhaps God has you standing in green grass already. Life isn't perfect, it's broken, but perhaps there's some green grass that we're already standing in. And I realize that this hits everybody in the room at a different place. We all have different schedules, different scenarios in life, different green grass things that we think about. And so to wrap up, what I want to do is I just want to ask you a list of questions. And my hope is that you can just think about how this potentially applies in your life as we go through these. The first question is this: what is hurry currently robbing from your life? What is hurry currently robbing from your life? Is it potentially your health, your joy, your peace, your success? Is it relationships? Is it relationships with the most important people you have? Your kids, your spouse? Is it your relationship with God? Go to the next question. Where do you need to stop saying it's just a season? Would anybody close to you say that you say this quite a bit? It's just a season. It's just a season. Where do you potentially need to stop saying that? Or better yet, have you identified an end date for the season? Because if it doesn't have an end date, it's not a season. That's just the pace of life. Where do you potentially need to stop saying it's just a season? Where do set apart moments happen in your life? Where do those restful, still, set apart, recharging moments happen for you? Jesus said it's not about the law, it's about the freedom you experience as a result of the law. And so this freedom can look different for everybody in here. For some of you in here, it just looks like an adventurous day in Austin or something like that. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe that's restful to you. If you're in here, maybe it's family and friends. For those of you who have kids, you might say, Jeremy, you don't get a day off when you have kids, which I totally get. Somebody told me that this week. But maybe for you, it's finding what those set apart moments look like in your life. Maybe for you, it's exercise or sports, or maybe it's running a marathon. Whatever it is, whatever those restful moments are for you in your life, have you taken time to identify those and write them down? And once you've done that, have you answered this question? When do set apart moments happen in your life? When do they happen? Have you scheduled those? Maybe it's a day for you. Maybe that's realistic for you. Or maybe for you it's 2 or 3 or 4 hours that you can just, this is all the time you can carve out and that you can pause and you can rest. But in doing so, when you do that you'll be a better person, you'll be a better spouse, a better parent as a result of taking that time to recharge. When do those times happen for you? Where do you need to be content being imperfect to find time to rest? You know, we all have that list of categories where we want to get to a 10 in all of these areas. But where do we need to be okay potentially saying, I'm not going to be a 10 in this category so that I can rest and I can be better in the more important priorities and categories in my life? Where do you potentially need to be content being imperfect so you can rest and be better in the important parts of your life? This one might push a couple buttons, but where are you escaping to instead of resting? Where are you escaping to? Where are you going to instead of resting in that recharging time? Where are you going to that potentially leaves you feeling more drained? I know for me that if I just binge watch TV and movies, that I don't feel rested, that I end up feeling more drained than I originally started. Maybe for you, you do feel rested when you do that, but are you potentially escaping, just finding a way to kind of shut out the world instead of resting and recharging? Where are you potentially escaping to? And then the last one is this, is do you invite God into your rest? Do you invite God into your rest? When you have those times to recharge, are you going towards the only source of life that can ultimately replenish you? Are you going and inviting God in? Are you reading? Are you journaling? Are you talking to him? Whatever it looks like for you, and inviting him in and allowing him to replenish you and sustain you day by day by day. He wants this for you. He wants you to experience this freedom, but he wants to be invited into that. Are you inviting him in? And I realize that you might be in here and you might be thinking, Jeremy, the cost is far too great. The money, the short-term cost, the time lost, the opportunity cost, the energy cost is far too great. I can't do that. And if that's you, I totally understand, and I don't want to pretend to understand all the complexities that you have going on in your life. But perhaps the blurred memories, the life that just goes by, the missed moments and missed experiences, and the opportunities to recharge and soak up and enjoy the life that God has, perhaps the long-term cost of that is far greater than whatever short-term cost you have sitting in front of you. And so would you be willing to perhaps trust God with your time in this area of your life and perhaps experience the freedom that he wants for every single person in this room? Would you be willing to take an act of faith and trust him with that, to see the example he sets, the command he gives to the Israelites, not to restrict, but to provide freedom to us and to rest and to stop looking at all the other greener grass and perhaps look down and notice the grass might be green right where we are standing. Would you pray with me for today? God, thank you so much for this time just to come and pause and invite you in. Thank you that you are here and that you love us and that you're for us, God, and you create these things in our life that aren't meant to restrict us, but to provide freedom to us, to experience the life that you have and that you want. God, help us today just pause a little bit more, just to soak up each moment, to be still, to not always be in a hurry. And God, help us invite you into each and every one of those moments. Thank you for the gift of a new day that you've given to every single person in this room. Would you help us just take advantage of that day that you provided? God, we pray all this in your name. Amen. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you for part 1 of our new Christmas series, Welcome to Wonderland.